welcome back to our final video of this lesson. And we're going to now add the molding, add the picture frame, and set up a camera for this final render scene. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. Let's go to our front view, and let's go up to our spline tool, get a linear spline, and let's zoom out a bit, and we're going to put one point along the edge of our wall, and then I'm going to hold down shift just in case, but I don't think I need to, and just place another one right there. So we got one straight line. Now I'm going to do Command Shift O, and that's going to bring up our merge options, and I'm going to bring in the baseboard. You see that I have a molding that I tried before. It didn't really work. It's more of a casing for a door or a window. So I'm going to hit OK, and that's going to bring it in all the way down here. I know from experience that it's too big, so you can go ahead and scale it down about 20 to 25%. So we're just going to scrub down to about 24, 22, and then we're going to grab these two. I'm going to go into our perspective mode. I'm going to hold down Option, and I'm going to drop those into a sweep NURB, and that didn't really work so well, so let's put that in there. Spline first, and then, baseboard first, and then the spline. And you see that it's facing the wrong way. So let's go ahead and just click on the sweep NURBs, hit R for rotation, and we're going to rotate it using the green band 180 degrees, negative 180 degrees, and move it back against the wall. Make sure that it's resting on the floor. So we want to zoom in a little bit just so we can better position this. Make sure that it's not going through the wall too much, maybe just ever so slightly, but not too much, because we will start seeing shadows there. So let's just bring it down a bit. That should be about fine. So let's go, and I'm going to command click to make a copy of our red texture, and I'm going to double click on that to open up our material editor. I'm going to go into the color channel, and I'm just going to change it to an off-white kind of color. That's fine. We're going to throw that onto the baseboard, and now the only thing we've got to do is make our picture frame. I left the picture frame for last because it's a little easier to get the scale right. In Z, I'm going to go ahead and just type in 5, and that should give us a flatter and cube. Excuse me. I'm going to make it a little bigger and hit the letter C to make it editable, and I'm going to grab the polygon tool, select that face, hit the letter I for extrude inner, extrude in, somewhere about maybe 10 centimeters should be fine. And then we're going to hit the letter D to extrude in, and we're going to go inward. We're going to go up to select and hit set selection. So now this polygon is its own selection, and it could be textured differently. I'm going to go into the material editor, go into color, and I'm going to load a texture. I used a image from a photography show that I did several years back. Feel free to use any image you'd like. It really doesn't matter which one you use. So we're just going to find, or try to find, that image. Let's see if there it is. Use that, cover pick. And no, I don't want to save. And I can close that. Add it to the cube. You see that it's texturing the frame as well. We don't want that, so we'll click on the texture tag and we'll add the selection that we set before. I'm going to take the metal from the table and I'm going to throw it before the texture tag, or before the selection, and now it's only texturing the frame. So that sets that up pretty well. And now we can kind of start zooming in. You can go ahead and add a couple of lights to the scene. I'm going to make this light slightly yellow. Not too yellow, but just a little yellow. And I'm going to move this one to the top right of the scene. So this will almost be like natural sunlight coming in through a window. And I'm going to command click and drag to make a copy of that. And I'm going to move this one back a bit, and I'm going to change this one to be a little bit more blue. That's maybe too much. We're going to really subtle with these because otherwise you will start to see these colors reflecting, especially on the white baseboard. I'm going to highlight both of these and change the intensity to 70%. So now it's a little less bright than what it was before. And that's pretty good right here. Resetting up the scene. It's got a camera in here. And if we go into the camera under details, you can turn on depth of field for the front and the rear of the camera itself. And if you go into the top mode, you can see where the controls are. It's a lot easier to control it this way. Let's go into my selection tool. And so this right here, this darker green, is what's controlling the start of the front depth of field. And so from here to here, it's going to be most blurred up here, and then this is going to be in focus, and then from here to the rear depth of field control is going to be another gradient, so from focus to out of focus all the way to the back. So these are the controls for the depth of field. I'm going to go ahead and just drag on that and make sure that this one doesn't go past the camera. Our camera's down here at the origin. I'm just bringing these in a bit. And I don't want to go too crazy with the depth of field. I really wanted to introduce it to give you guys an opportunity to play around with it. I think that it's an awesome way of creating very interesting images inside of a 3D program. But, you know, because this scene is kind of head-on, and we don't really have a lot of depth in the scene itself, I don't want to go too crazy with it. I might end up actually turning it off. In the version that I showed you at the beginning of this last unit, I actually had it turned off. But this is what you would have to do in order to set that up. So we're going to go into the output. We're going to change this to 1280 by 720. And then we're going to go into save, and I'm going to set a place to save it. I'm just going to save it into my Skillshare folder. I'm going to give it a name of Final Scene. I'm going to hit save. And yes, I want TIFF. I don't need an alpha channel. You can change the depth to 32 if you'd like more definition, but I'm not going to do that just because I want this to render at a fairly decent speed. So I'm going to change from best to minimum level 2x2, 4x4. Options, I'm going to turn off my default light, and I'm going to go into effect, turn on ambient occlusion. I'm going to leave it at its default, even though I usually set my maximum ray length to 150 and my accuracy up to 75. That extra level of accuracy probably won't show in the video, so I'm not going to waste too much time rendering that out. And then we're going to turn on global illumination, and global illumination just gives you a more realistic render in the end. I'm also going to go into effect and add depth of field. Depth of field is what actually creates that depth of field. Some people like to go into lens and change it. I'm actually going to change it to a hexagon because I feel like that's a more realistic lens shape. So I'm going to close that. And now, excuse me, now we're going to pause the video. I'm going to do a quick render, and then we'll come back to see where we are. Okay, I'll see you guys in just a bit. Back, this is our completed render. One thing that I forgot to do before I paused the video to do the render was I forgot to turn on shadows, shadow mapping to soft inside of both of our lights, which is required for us to actually get shadows in the scene. So I went ahead and turned those back on, did another render. Then I realized that I forgot to push this frame up against the wall. So just make sure that your frame is up against the wall. Otherwise, it's just kind of floating in midair. And as you can see, we didn't get a lot of depth of field, and that's because I had my field for actual in-focus objects set to be pretty much where the couch is. And then the gradient for out of focus for the rear just kind of goes from this point beyond the wall. So this isn't the best example for the depth of field. I'm going to go ahead and pause it, put a ball in the scene, and move the camera down below by the ball, and have the ball be in focus, and then have the rest be out of focus, and I'll show you how that camera setup looks once I come back. So I'll be back shortly. Again, and as you can see, this example does a much better job of illustrating depth of field inside of a 3D program, Cinema 4D in particular. We basically needed something that was closer to the foreground in order to have that in focus and then allow the rest to be out of focus. So I just added a second camera and a sphere. I used the same glass texture from our vase on this sphere, and let me just go to the top view to show you what the camera setup looks like. So I position the second camera, I position the sphere first, and then I position the camera to have the sphere in view. This is the starting point of the front depth of field, and then my in focus plane is just behind the sphere, and then from this point to the rear depth of field plane, it starts to become out of focus. So by the time that you see the back here, everything is out of focus. So this does a much better job of illustrating that. You know, you don't need to have depth of field turned on, of course, but I wanted to make sure that that was at least something we touched upon. So go ahead and play around with these techniques. I hope that you've learned something from this. I hope that there's something that you're taking away from it. Excuse the bad organization over here. I should have named this floor, I should have named this back wall, but I really wanted to make sure that we covered a couple of things before we signed off on this project. So go ahead and play around with these techniques. Put up your renders so that we can all take a look at them and learn from each other. And I really hope to see you guys again soon in another video, in another series. Hopefully we'll do something a little bit more advanced, maybe a little bit more elaborate. But I think this is a good starting point, and I hope to see you guys in the video soon. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.